is up, guys? It is time for an MLB Deeper Dive. We will take you through all the things you need to know on today's lucky 13-game slate. And I am Chris Spags, joined once again. Actually, no, not even once again, because this man left us holding the bag. Then where does he show up? But on another show on the channel. But it's fine because he's the name of the channel. He's Awesemo. He's Alex Baker. How are you doing, Alex? And I guess welcome back to the show.
What's up, guys? Sorry for bailing on you yesterday, but I'm excited to talk some baseball today. Now, 13 games, you're right. That is a significant number. So I'm looking at Ronald Acuna today. He wears jersey 13. I mean, I hope you guys don't have any triskaidekaphobia today.
Is that the actual word? Wow, that's...
You like that?
You honestly knew you knew DFS. I didn't know you knew the random words for fears of things. But we have another guy here well-equipped to ride today, a man who was here yesterday, and I think I'll treat him even better today as a result. He's a director of customer success at Awesemo. He's Terry McBride. How you doing, Terry?
Doing pretty well, buddy. It's been a good day. Went way overboard writing about this nice big 13-game slate. I think I gave the people like 3,300 words on it today. So we've got a bunch of content out there, ton of stuff at the site to hit up about it. But I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. There's a ton of good pitching options was the first thing that really jumped out to me. But yeah, I was going to give the boss a little ribbing here for bailing on us yesterday too. But then he swooped in like Batman and saved the basketball show later in the day, though. So I guess we got to let him slide.
I honestly would have had a pretty good bit to fill in for Eric, but I'm going to save that for the tip-off tomorrow. But I trust me, there's something I'm so excited to do, and it takes me every fiber of my being to not have spoiled it yesterday on the show with Aton. But tune in to Live Before Lock with me and Eric as well later today. Check that one out for the NBA. But let's talk about the plugs for this show, of course. First thing you guys need to know, free premium tool of the day is going to be our player rankings. So that is the grade form of all the player projections that we talk about on this show. So if you are a person who's trying to build some lineups today, especially if you're a casual player out there, to do some quick work for yourself, using these player rankings today going to be very helpful. So check that out. It's a free premium tool that is normally a part of the Express package, but also this show. We wouldn't be able to do it today if it weren't courtesy of our sponsor, No House Advantage, who's doing their thing to take a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes, exclusively peer-to-peer platform. And it's going to level the playing field for you and make it easier for you to win real cash compared to your traditional DFS sites. We have over 500 player props offering. And with that, No House Advantage is the largest provider of player props in the whole industry. The best part is that you get yourself a $20 first match deposit bonus today by using the promo code Awesemo at No House Advantage. So beat your friends, not the house. Download in the App Store and win big with player props today. And use that promo code Awesemo for your $20 first match deposit bonus. And now also make sure to check out all the data that we have today at awesemo.com/join. Get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. That is full access to all the player projections, ownership projections, lineup builder, the top stacks tool, the top pitchers tool. That is all at your fingertips. If you get that Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95, you can also just play MLB DFS by getting the MLB weekly package for $15.95. But either way, stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. And I feel like Terry already hinted at the pitching, so let's just get right to it here and hit that like button, guys. We appreciate that a bunch, as well as subscribing to the channel because we have content here, as you may have guessed, all day long for all the sports that are going on. But it is a slate today, and I'll start with you, Terry, because I know you've been dying to talk about this guy, Jacob DeGrom, going to be the projected top pitcher on the slate. And a day two where the price tag has started to come up. This is something that Alex has talked about a lot in these shows, where there was a bit of a price cap on some of the pitchers recently, and I guess they have lifted it today. So Terry, give me your thoughts on Jacob DeGrom and the Fanduel ones as well, where Fanduel is certainly going to be a different case on the single pitcher sites, as we always talk about.
Yeah, so DeGrom is our apex pitcher on both sites, basically. Ranks out at the top of the board. He's the highest price guy, $12,000 on FanDuel, $11,800 on DK. Justifiably so. I mean, he's Jake DeGrom. He's pitching just fantastically well so far this season. I'm just pulling up his numbers as I'm talking about him here. The one question mark that I have with DeGrom is going to be the longevity, coming back off the injured list. He hasn't pitched since earlier this month, about 2 weeks ago. And he had come out of his most recent start before that. I am struggling. There it is. Couldn't find the Rockies on my away team list there. He had come out of his most recent start before that after pitching just 5 innings. But before that, he hadn't gone less than 6 in any start he made all year. Pitching fantastically well to a 1.77 xFIP and a .60 WHIP with a 46.1% strikeout rate. Approaching 50% of the striking out 50% of the hitters that you face. That just makes you absolutely dominant. He's inarguably the most talented pitcher on a really talented slate. I just question the innings for the money. So if we're thinking about it in terms of, there's only so many points a pitcher can score in each inning that he pitches. He's one of the most likely pitchers to capitalize on all of those points in each of those innings that he pitches. It's just a matter of, are we getting him for 5 innings here, or are we getting him for 8 innings here? That would be my only question with Jake DeGrom at this price.
Yeah, Alex, how are you handling DeGrom? Because he's a guy who's pitched just shy of 7 innings per start, I guess per appearance, but definitely per start for him this year. And he is a guy that is coming off of about 3 weeks of layoff here, I guess a little bit less than that for himself. So what are the expectations you have for him to go deep into this game? And are you willing to trust him at that lofty price tag?
Yeah, I mean, the report this morning was that there would be no pitch count. It would just be like, how does he feel? Which is a little bit worrying because there was one start this year that he wasn't feeling good, and then he got pulled pretty quick after starting. So actually, was that the last one where he only pitched 68 pitches? Anyway,
yep.
There is some risk of that, but it's baseball. Like, there's like absolutely no need to rush guys back with 162 games in a season. So I'd be surprised if he's not close to 100%. So that's how I'm playing it today.
I guess, are there any reservations at all going to DeGrom? I feel like I just have to ask this question. It doesn't seem like it, given the fact that he's facing Colorado, a team whose projected lineup today has 7 guys that strike out over league average, 28% aggregate K rate for them since 2019. But I have to ask the question, Alex, is there anything that you could see, I guess, besides the pitch count issues that would keep you from having some level of confidence in DeGrom today?
Yeah. I mean, they got Charlie Blackmon on the on the Rockies, so it's hard to see DeGrom getting past Blackmon.
Yeah, that's what we all knew. The analysis we were dying for. 2.3 implied runs, a pretty low mark, even by the standards of, I guess, what we've seen with a lot of heavy pitching to start the year. But Alex, I'll ask you too: is this one of the lower implied totals? You might have a little bit higher than I do, but is this one of the lower implied totals you've seen for a pitcher recently?
Yeah. I mean, it's really rare to see a guy under 3. I think this is by far the lowest I've seen ever in the past few years. So a few years ago, I guess maybe you had some games where it's like Kershaw versus DeGrom. It'd be like a 6 over under, and that's what we're at today. But this is unusually low, and it makes sense because Colorado's lineup is terrible, and DeGrom is like the best in the league. So I think 2.6 might be as low as it gets.
Terry, I guess, is there any final thoughts you have about DeGrom here? It does seem like he's projected for under 30% ownership on DK. Maybe people being a little bit more afraid of that pitch count or informal pitch count that could be in place today. But he has a 35% chance of being a top pitcher. I guess, is there a number that you feel like you would be comfortable to get to DeGrom today, whether it be on DraftKings or FanDuel, Terry?
In terms of my my total
like an exposure cap, let's say, just like what number gets to be too much for you?
If the field was getting out to, like 35, 40% of them, something like that, that's where I'd start to maybe peel back, get around, but I'd still want to get 20, 25% of them. Like, I don't want him out of my portfolio by any means. He is one of the most likely starters to be the top scorer here on the slate. So yeah, if it starts getting, and that's true for any baseball player, really, if somebody's out at like 50% public ownership, I'm going to reconsider my shares, and I'm going to strongly consider getting below just based on the variance, the nature of the sport. But to Alex's point, that's the lowest total that I remember seeing on any individual team in a long, long time. So yeah, I think this is a great spot. And the Rockies have earned that. They're creating runs 33% worse than average this year against right-handed pitching. So, I mean, there's a justifiable reason that's that low. And it's not like this is any old righty. This is the best righty in baseball. So fire away.
On DraftKings, we currently do have higher ownership projected for another pitcher who's a bit cheaper on DraftKings today, in Max Scherzer, just shy of 40% ownership expected for him on DraftKings today. And he's in another good matchup going against Cincinnati, getting the park downgrade for them, not being in their home park, but also 7 guys that strike out above league average in their projected lineup today. And Scherzer's stuff, is sort of stabilized where you'd want it to see. His K rate's actually up to just shy of 36% on the year. The whip is down to 0.85. Some of the earlier concerns of the year do seem like they could be eclipsed. I guess the chase rate being down is one thing you could point to, in addition to a bit of a drop off in velocity. But Alex, Scherzer's been pretty good on the year, it seems, and certainly in a spot on paper here. 3.1 implied run total for him going against him, I guess, with Cincinnati. How much do you like Scherzer, I guess, relative to the fact that DeGrom currently seems under-owned?
Yeah, I think the price difference is enough to justify going to Scherzer. He's in a great spot. Not against the worst team in the league like DeGrom is, but he's got good strikeout stuff. The Reds lineup strikes out more than average, but they do have more power than your typical lineup. So it's not as much of a spot where we know for sure if Scherzer goes that he's going to have a successful start, but this is about as good as you're going to get, excluding very big outliers like DeGrom today.
Terry, how are you feeling about Scherzer, where, again, playing mostly on FanDuel, you're going to have to make that choice between the two. Are you feeling very comfortable going to Scherzer? I guess, would you have any sort of FOMO if you got to him instead of Jacob DeGrom? How are you approaching him?
I will have some Scherzer, but I'll probably end up under the field on max on the FanDuel slate. He's 26%, so it's not getting out crazy numbers. But that's a good example of where I'm beginning to get concerned, and it's particularly because of the spot. I'm actually a little surprised, and this is where I love our ownership projections because they're so accurate and they're so strong. Just looking at this slate this morning, I was thinking, all right, DeGrom is definitely going to be the highest owned pitcher despite the heavy ownership. And Scherzer's in a tough matchup against Cincinnati. Yeah, they do have a decent amount of strikeouts available in that lineup, but they've done fairly well this season with the strikeouts in the split. And they create runs 11% better than average, striking out 22.9% of the time against righties for the full active roster. Fourth in baseball with a 187 team ISO against right-handed pitching. So he's an elite option on any slate in any matchup. I trust Max Scherzer implicitly, but between the two, I greatly prefer the matchup for Jacob DeGrom. So I'm actually willing to spend that money if he's going to be the lower owned one. That said, there are so many good options and some lower priced options on this slate that I really like that I don't know that I'm going to be over the field on either one of these guys. I might come in around the field on DeGrom and probably a little bit under on Scherzer because I just want to spread out. I want to capture a range of outcomes on this slate.
So we do have some more chalk pitchers to hit on, but Terry, because there are so many guys that we have on the slate today that we're not going to definitely be able to get to all of them. Take me to one of your guys that you're viewing as a cheaper option that you find to be a priority, because I think getting to guys who are actually playing is probably going to be more helpful for the people out there.
Sure. Joe Musgrove for me is dramatically underpriced on FanDuel. He has earned more than an $8,400 price tag. I think he's probably underpriced at 95 on DK, honestly. He's facing a Brewers lineup that has a 138 team ISO against right-handed pitching. They've created runs 20% worse than average so far this year. 26.6% strikeout rate is third worst in the split against righties. I looked it up since we were talking about it yesterday. Just wanted to see, since they've gotten back to a little bit of health, as that improved a little bit over the last couple of weeks. So over the last 2 weeks, very small sample for baseball. Keep that in mind. But it's improved from the number I said a minute ago, 26.6 to 25.6% against right-handed pitching. So it's still a very strong strikeout rate for him to attack. That's only a couple games of Christian Yelich. We're putting one of the best players in baseball back in this lineup. We've got to keep that in mind. But the price is just aggressively strong. Musgrove striking out 34.7% of hitters this year, 2.47 xFIP, 0.86 whip over his first 51 innings. Had a no-hitter earlier in the year. Just love the spot for Musgrove, and I think he's mispriced. So that's one I'm definitely going to be hammering.
Alex, how are you feeling about Joe Musgrove in this spot? Because he has been really good on the year overall, 35% K rate. Terry mentioned some of the other numbers here for the spot against Milwaukee, who is going to be getting a little bit healthier, but still overall it doesn't seem like they have enough guys to get there and cause some concern for Musgrove. And we have seen some good success recently for San Diego pitchers against Milwaukee. So are you willing to get to Musgrove as a lower owned pivot to some of the other more expensive options that I guess we are treating like they're sure things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of different pitchers you can kind of mix and match here. I agree with Terry that 8,400 on FanDuel is exceptional for Musgrove. He seems like one of the best options, and he's only 9% owned. So that seems like a good buy low spot. On DraftKings, there are like so many cheap, good pitchers that I think he's just kind of in the mix. The matchup versus Milwaukee, as you guys mentioned, Yelich is back, but that just brings them to about average statistically as a team right now. So this is a positive matchup where they strike out more than average too. So I think Musgrove has been fantastic this year so far, and there's not much reason to doubt that he'll be able to have a good start to that.
In that same game, we do have Corbin Burns, a guy who has also been pretty strong as a chalk pitcher in some of these spots, and on paper might have the best strikeout rate on the slate, a 45% carry, a little bit less than that, a .62 whip for himself. He is facing a San Diego team who is tough on paper, but yesterday this was one debate point that Terry and I had on the show talking about going to Brandon Woodruff versus going to some of the other guys on the slate. And John Means to me, I think, ended up being a viable pivot to him, but he still got dusted by 15 fantasy points. I do think in this spot with Burns, like I have the same concerns here where on paper, it's a tough matchup against San Diego. Even guys like Jake Cronenworth have hit righties pretty well over the last few years. I'm surprised to see a 153 WRC plus for him since 2019, but Burns' stuff is so good. And I think better than Woodruff that it sort of gives me some concern that I might not be playing enough Burns today, Terry. And I feel like the projection as well does put him in that spot at a price tag that's cheaper than a lot of the guys that we've hit on. So how are you handling Corbin Burns?
Yeah, he's another guy. I wrote a little bit about each of these guys we've talked about, and he's on the list. I do think it's a tough spot. The Padres' 20.3% strikeout rate against righties so far this season for the active roster. That's second best in baseball. So it's a good lineup that he's facing. But yeah, 44.7% strikeout rate for the pitcher this season. Can't be ignored, really. And the whip that he's got, and he's walking just 1.3% of hitters so far this year. He's been phenomenal. So I think the price is probably a little bit low on him. I think I expect he's going to be popular. I don't have our most recent run of projections in front of me as I'm saying that, so let me pull that up. So he's projecting out a little bit further than we've got him in terms of probability of success on the Draftkings slate, and then on the Fanduel slate, similar story, a little bit closer on the Fanduel slate, where he's kind of similar to Joe Musgrove in terms of the overall ownership. Well, actually, no, he's a little bit less owned than Musgrove. So he makes an interesting pivot spot there, but you're paying up to do it. On the DK slate, they're similarly priced, and you're getting more ownership on Burns. So I actually prefer Musgrove on the DK side of things, where you're paying a little bit more for Musgrove. So it's an interesting comparison between the two. I expect I'll probably settle in a little bit below the field on Burns if I were playing on DK, and maybe a little bit above the under 10% ownership projection we've got for him on the Fanduel slate. I do like the spot for him, and he's been excellent for the year.
And to Terry's point, the top pitcher stool currently has Corbin Burns having a 19.6% chance of being a top two pitcher on DraftKings. Joe Musgrove a 19.2% chance. So you're basically talking about very narrow margin between the two guys, even though there is more ownership going to Burns. I think I personally, I do like Burns more on paper, but I think for tournaments, that's a pretty good point by Terry that you are paying up to be contrarian, something that does pay off a good amount in MLB DFS. So something to keep in mind there. On DraftKings, we have to talk more about Andrew Heaney, and maybe he might be in play on FanDuel as well, but Heaney going against Texas, 3.8 implied runs against him. Heaney on the year, just shy of a 31% K rate, which actually up a good amount from his 2019 sample size of 28%. He does give up some power in a way that I think could be concerning. The launch angle looks not the best. The 11% barrel ball rate, the 5% home run rate on the year. These are numbers that are some cause for concern, I think, overall. But on the slate, Alex, it does seem like Heaney has a very high probability of being a top value pitcher, and it's certainly a price tag that bafflingly low for a guy who's had the strikeouts he's had. So I guess how are you handling Andrew Heaney today on a slate where he is a very obvious pay down option?
Yeah, I agree that it is a little baffling why he's only 6,200 on DraftKings. 7,600 on FanDuel is reasonable, but not quite as egregious. Texas, we've known, is a bad team, and to top it off, a lot of their good players are left-handed bats like Gallo. So this matchup for Heaney is a little bit better than even just average pitcher going against Texas. So I do think that he really stands out as a great play. But the one thing I've noticed is that the need for salary savings in MLB hasn't been quite as big this year, because there haven't been a ton of offenses projected to do extremely well. That's just been harder to hit in general so far this year. So I have found that when guys get really popular, the first guys for me to pivot off are these cheap, high-owned guys. Heaney is good enough that I think the ownership is justifiable, but there are a lot of other great pitchers on this slate too. So I'm a little torn.
Terry, how would you handle Heaney? And I guess if you have any interest in him on FanDuel, thrown into the mix, but Alex raises some good points about GPP construction with Heaney. So just give me your thoughts on how you would handle him on DraftKings and how you are going to handle him on FanDuel.
I would actually maybe take Alex's point there even further and start looking at some of these Rangers bats coming back the other way. I think there is some upside here. I'm getting some very nice power indicators for several of their bats. I think Chris Davis back from the dead could be sneaky for a totally min salary on FanDuel, 2,200 on DK. If you want a one-off for a home run upside, maybe there's something there. I'm getting a nice mark on him. I do hate that Joey Gallo hits left-handed in this matchup. If you had him on the other side of the plate, it would be a smash spot for me. But I'm getting enough indicators, and I think having like a guy like Willie Calhoun hit back in that lineup, a guy like Kiner Falefa, these guys who can offset a little bit of the strikeout potential. Calhoun's an upside bat. I don't know about Kiner Falefa, but there's enough there where they're getting away from some of the strikeouts, and I think the power could come back to bite Heaney. So I'm not getting the greatest projection on him in my personal model. It's not bad, but if the field's going to be there, I think I'd just rather be somewhere else. And if I'm considering being somewhere else, that might lead me into these Texas bats with that power projection I'm getting.
So let's talk about, I guess, about some of the pivots out there that could exist. And one that does seem to have a good probability or decent probability of being a top pitcher and also a decent possibility of being one of the top values is Kevin Gausman. And he does seem to be not as highly owned going against Arizona, who doesn't strike out a ton, only a 93.6% K rate for themselves on the year against right-hand pitching. But still, Gausman stuff has been another guy. Another guy's been pretty good, a 30% K rate, a shockingly low 0.8 whip that I would imagine will come up a little bit, but a 3.2 xFIP. Like, Gausman is very viable this year in a way that I'm kind of surprised. I looked through the numbers earlier and surprised again seeing it now. Terry, would you consider Gausman a pivot you'd go to, or I guess, or would you just try to differentiate entirely from people taking value pitchers? Because Gausman's going to be 15% owned, so less owned than Heaney, but still going to be decently represented.
Yeah, I like Gasman a lot better than Heaney in this spot. This would be my my guy to go to. I wrote about him a little bit in the column this afternoon, and I think the numbers are a little bit surprising when we think about Kevin Gasman from back in the day in Baltimore, but he's just not that pitcher anymore. He made significant changes when he came out to San Fran last year, and he's held it together. He was at 32.2% strikeouts with a 306 xFIP and a 111 whip last season across 59 and 2/3 innings. He's thrown exactly the same sample size this year, and he's at 29.6% strikeouts, 321 xFIP, and a .80 whip. So he's improved in the ability to limit runners getting on base against him. Allowed a couple more runs, struck out a fewer hitters, but he's right there. He's been sharp for the last year plus. So yeah, really like the spot for Gausman. They're the Arizona roster, 10th in baseball with a 23.1% strikeout rate against righties this year, but creating runs 12% worse than average, just a 153 TIM ISO. So not a lot to fear really coming back against them the other way. So I think it's a good spot, even if it's a little bit limited on the extreme upside end of it. I think he's at worst safe. So as an SP2 on DraftKings, I think that's a home run.
Gausman pitching about 6.5 innings per appearance this year and has actually been faced enough batters this year to think that's not too much of an aberration. But Alex, how are you feeling about Gausman with decent ownership on him and a slate where it's worth pointing out, like we've covered most of these guys? I guess Giolito is really the one that we have to cover still, but everybody else besides these guys that we've hit on projected for under 10% ownership. So is that something where you're willing to kind of cast your die with some of these lesser owned guys, Alex, or are you willing to go to Gausman at this 15% mark?
Well, I think Gasman is totally fine at 15%. He is coming off a great 2020 season where we were kind of like, is this legit? Because he took such a step forward. And he's proven this year that it is. He's been excellent this year. Now, the matchup isn't ideal for DFS because a lot of the Arizona bats that we're projecting to be in the lineup are pretty low strikeout guys. So that is a negative, even though they are one of the weaker teams in the league. But his overall skill level is a lot higher than 7,200. And it's funny, on FanDuel, he's 10.8K. So there's like an extreme discrepancy between the two sites there. But there are a lot of other guys that we can look at. One I'm kind of eyeing on this slate is on the other side of this game with Corbin Martin. I might get some eye rolls from the audience here. He's only 5,200 though, which is the main point. But I think he might be a decent strikeout guy, which is the main thing I'm hoping for at that price. So let me ask you guys, how are you feeling about Corbin Martin?
Terry, I'll throw it to you, but I'll offer up a 26% K rate for him. Faced 23 batters this year, so that is not the best. And the swinging strike rate and chase rate are low, but I guess the fact he's getting strikeouts with that low of a swinging strike rate and chase rate does seem kind of interesting. Only a 5% swinging strike rate in this limited sample size, 21% chase rate. But Terry, what are your thoughts on Corbin Martin, the Arizona starting pitcher?
I wrote up the San Francisco Giants as my stack of the day.
So you're not a Corbin Martin believer. You like the other Corbin slightly better, I guess.
Not so much. So they weren't my leaders in terms of like my overall projection or the power indicators, but they were getting enough in both of those categories. And then the way that they ranked out on our top stacks tool, and they were getting a little bit of positive leverage on both sides. I like to look for like, a mix of all those indicators when I pick which team to write about, because I'm getting one good shot to give somebody good advice. So I thought this was a good blend of those. Martin, over his minor league career, has been mostly in like the mid-20s strikeout rate at any time he's cracked to like an advanced AA, AAA type of a level. So he hasn't been really a standout for strikeout rate, except for when he's pitched at like low A. Then he's popped for some strikeouts. I just think it's a good spot for the Giants. 46 home runs against right-handed pitching is among the league leaders this year, a 176 team ISO. They've struck out a lot this season in the split. I've mentioned it a few times going the other way, selecting a pitcher against these guys. League worst, 28.1% strikeout rate for the Giants in the split. But I just think a lot of professional hitters in this lineup. I think that's a little bit of an aberration still. This team has been much, much better at not striking out over the years. So I think that regresses back to the norm, and there's just too many good professional hitters who are having very good seasons so far in this lineup. And I'm thinking of, Buster Posey, of course, but also Brandon Crawford's having a great year. Brandon Belt is having a good year for power. Evan Longoria out to a bit of a slow start, but a quality hitter. All of the top 6 hitters in this lineup, the average WRC plus run creation is 139. So that's the top 5 hitters. Create runs 39% better than average overall this season so far. So a lot to like about the Giants side of things. I'd be careful with Corbin Martin here.
Terry, anybody else you want to throw to the embers, I guess, of our pitching conversation here? There's so many guys that you could suggest. I feel like Flaherty and Giolito may be one spot we didn't talk about at all that I think the pitching in that game, I wouldn't mind getting a little exposure to either side. But is there anybody else that you want to bring to the people?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be on the Giolito side of that one, and I think he's priced exceptionally well. 8,500 on Fanduel, 8,700 on DK. The matchup not that great for with St. Louis coming back the other way, but it's also not tragic. One of the better pitchers in the league, so that's another spot he's projecting pretty well. Just to talk through him kind of quickly, so I like that spot. I think Jose Berrios going up against the Orioles could be somewhat interesting for similar pricing, kind of in the mid-range. And then Tyler Mahle, I get good projections coming back the other way, decent power marks for a renewed Washington lineup. But Mahle's just been pitching pretty well overall for the season. Very good strikeout option and underpriced at 7,500 on the FanDuel slate. So he's in play for me, although not nearly as much as he normally would be on a smaller slate. Just so many good options today.
Alex, anybody else? I feel like you offered up Corbin Martin, so you don't have to throw another guy into the mix if you want, but if there is anybody else you want to hit on, maybe, I don't know, Logan Gilbert, your guy, also cheap. Feel free to throw it out to the people now.
I wrote about the A's too.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of great options because the top of the range is so good, and you got a few cheapies like Heaney that really, like I was mentioning how like Corbin Martin, but Heaney looks like so much better of an option. Mm-hmm. And he's only 1,000 more. So that makes it really hard to get to low price guys. I do feel like Logan Gilbert isn't crazy, but on today's slate, it may be a little stretch. He just has played really bad in the first 2 starts. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do here, where he's throwing around 70 pitches in the first 2, but he also gave up 4 and 3 earned runs, if I remember correctly. So if he's having a better game, will he throw more pitches? That's really the key question, because he's going to need to go deeper in games to match up with some of the other options on the slate.
One other guy I'm just going to throw out there, and you guys can kick it back if you want, but Cole Irvin fits a lot of the criteria of guys who've thrown no-hitters recently, and as much as he's not very good and facing Seattle and also doesn't give up a ton of power. So I would throw him in the mix. Seattle striking out a 29.5% clip against lefties, and Cole Irvin's the most direct price point pivot, I think, who's like, vaguely competent to Andrew Heaney. So I would just say him, Alex. I don't know if you have any thoughts on him, but if you do, feel free to put him in.
In general, like the same price pivot, I don't love the strategy because it's like you're just making a worse lineup than a lot of other people that have basically the other players being pretty similar. So if I'm pivoting away from Heaney, I'm probably going to go to like 2 high price guys, or the thing is he's about the lowest price, so that makes it tough to go to other low price guys. But I don't hate Cole Irvin in isolation. He's been successful at limiting runs this year. Not a great strikeout pitcher with 18%, but you were talking about how Seattle, a candidate to get no hit on a regular basis. So he's a fine play, but today's pitching slate is stacked, so I'm looking for a little bit better.
I just wanted to plant my flag on this potential no-hitter is really the main thing that I'm saying. Harry, do you have any Cole Irvin thoughts for yourself? I agree the strikeout rate does look bad, but I'll tell you what, I would have said the same thing about some of the guys they've been no-hit by recently.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's obviously a credible theory at this point with this team. I just think, if I'm playing on DK, I'm looking for that SP2. I kind of agree with Alex that I don't know that he's my guy at 6,700. Not like I'm going to Steven Matz, who I have projected worse or around the same at 6,800 going up against the Yankees. But I think I'd just rather spend 500 more and go from Cole Irvin at 67 all the way up to Kevin Gausman, who I've projected way better at 7,200. I'd rather spend my money that way. I would even trust, Clay Kershaw at 8,000 more than I would want to pay down to Cole Irvin at that price, I think. So, and to Alex's point earlier, I just, this is a year where we haven't really needed to spend those savings. So there's a lot of lineups where I'm putting in with some of these discount pitchers and I'm still leaving, a lot of money on the table. So I'd rather just roster a good pitcher at that point,
Yeah, no, that's reasonable. And I think at this point, I just got to throw them out sometimes. And that's all it is. Not anybody that we're advocating for. Like we talked about the top guys here. There are clearly defined top pitchers on the slate. So if you're a person out there, hey, nickel and diming any sort of takes on this show, like you must not have played a lot of MLB DFS this year, which is the main thing that I would say overall. Also, I have to point out, I forgot to switch hats. I came from the gym and I'm not wearing a money hat right now. So I guess it's Japanese pro wrestling time here. De Japón, and we are in honor of Naito and the boys and the rest of them going to give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and Fanduel, because money time never sleeps even when I wear the wrong hat. Here you go, cash. We got the cash money hat. So Alex,
finally I have the superior money hat, so I'm excited for this moment. Does that mean I get to read off the highest owned plays?
Hey, if you want to, Alex, please go ahead.
All right, since I'm the de facto money time guy here, what we're looking at on DraftKings, Scherzer, Heaney. Okay, this one is interesting. Luis Arias, presumably leading off for Minnesota at 27%, and then it gets in the DeGrom, and then Kepler for Minnesota. The Twins have a 5.8 run total today, so it's not wild that they're going to be the highest owned stack. But seeing these 2 guys in the top 5 of ownership is a little bit jarring. What are you guys thinking about the Twins' ownership here?
Sarah, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, there's no universe in which Luis Arias should be higher owned than Jake DeGrom or many, many other players. So I agree that stack's very much in play. They're popping to the top of my list, one of the better power ranked teams overall. But Luis Arias is not a part of that, guys. He's a .057 ISO for the year so far, 6% below average creating runs. He's actually hit a home run so far this year, 162. That's more than 162 plate appearances. That's more home runs than he hit last year in 121 tries. 2 years ago, he hit 4 home runs in 366 tries. He's a very good guy at getting on base, and he's got an excellent hit tool. That's what he brings to the lineup, and he doesn't strike out much. So he could be on base in front of these other hitters, but he's not the guy to roster as like a premium guy to go to from this team. Certainly not a guy you want to be going to as a one-off by any means. Those are the Josh Donaldsons, Nelson Cruzes, Alex Kirilloffs of the world in this lineup. Those are the guys you want to smash for those spots. So yeah, that seems extreme on the ownership there.
Well, you're going to love these FanDuel top 5 then, because number 1 is Josh Donaldson and number 2 is Nelson Cruz, the 2 guys who just dropped. So I see Tyler reacting to the high Nelson Cruz ownership behind the scenes here. So if Minnesota is high on DraftKings, they're like way higher on FanDuel. Like they're super cheap, so it's going to be tantalizing. But the next highest owned, Scherzer, Stanton, Jose Ramirez. So it looks like the pitcher ownership is a lot more spread out on FanDuel, with only one pitcher in the top 5. Of course, you only get one per roster, so that makes all of them look lower. But Spags, what are you thinking about this FanDuel ownership with Stanton and Ramirez in the top 5?
I mean, for me, I would say that ownership does seem pretty lofty overall. Stanton, I think, certainly has the pop, but we also know it's just as likely you're going to get a day of a few strikeouts, even against Steven Matz, who's not the best strikeout guy, but still has a 24% K rate. I get why people would go there, but I tend to not be as inclined to follow the chalk power bats as much, especially guys that do strike out at a 28% clip like Stanton. So that's my take on it. But Terry, you got any FanDuel chime in you want to throw in here before we go dig deeper on all the bats out there?
Yeah, overall, I'm very much looking to get away from over-owned teams. So those are very good options, and I will have some shares of them in my lineups. I'm going to look for creative ways to put those lineups together because I do want to get to some Twins. I do want to get to some Yankees. But yeah, when I was describing those guys as those are the one-offs that you want to get to with a guy like Donaldson and a guy like Cruz, I should have put the caveat in there when they're not 30% owned. Those are not one-off plays that you want to make when they're that popular. It's just the way that baseball works with the extreme variance in the sport. You're very likely to roster a 0 and go down with the ship along with 30% of the field. I'd rather get to a spot where I can be different if my guy goes off and not just ride with the field if it goes off and crash and burn with the field if it doesn't. So yeah, definitely a lot of good reasons to look around and shop around for better stacks. Alex, just real quick, with the pitching ownership, the way that it was looking on FanDuel, where it's spread out a little bit more, does that lead you toward thinking, all right, maybe I do want to kind of laser focus in on maybe just a couple of my highest end options and get above the field on them? Or are you going to try and spread out with the field and just capture a range of outcomes?
Well, the thing I like on FanDuel is 2 of our guys that we're really liking, Heaney and I think Gasman. Wait, no, Gasman's super expensive on FanDuel.
Musgrove?
Musgrove, yeah. They're not like super high owned, so they definitely stand out a lot because Scherzer at 11K. I mean, we were just talking about how he's in a good spot for strikeouts, but Cincinnati is not a team you can just roll over. So he does seem like when you factor in the ownership, a guy that you might want to pivot away from.
Let's actually take the super chat real fast so we can continue to dig on the stacks. I don't want to, our boy Kevin S always has to be heard, and I demand that we do it as well. Picking 2 for DK Cash. If you had to choose, Terry, I'll throw to you first. If you had to choose 2 between Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and Kevin Stadler, he actually left out the R, so I guess not Kevin Stadler. If you had to choose between Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and Kevin Stadler, which 2 would you pick for DK Cash?
I mean, if we're talking anything cash, we got to throw Iron Man in there because that's Tony Stark, one of the richest billionaires in the world, and brilliant genius as well. So he can help us with making our lineups. We can probably throw Jarvis's AI into helping make our lineup. So we'll go Tony Stark, and then I'm going to take Hulk. I got to go Hulk over Thor, even though they're the 2 most powerful Avengers. If you take their little argument in universe there, so I'll go Hulk. Just tend to Hulk out a little bit more than I am Thor and cool and tall and good looking.
Alex, I have to give you the ask as well because I know you are a big fan of Kevin S. So feel free to give your DK picks amidst Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, and Kevin Stadler.
Well, Terry, I disagree vehemently with Hulk. Hulk has great raw power, but when that translates into actual contact, he doesn't have very good control. So I think I might lean towards Kevin Stadler. We know that he's had a great swing for a long time.
I would say the important thing that people forget is that Iron Man currently dead. So I think I would go with Hulk and Thor.
Spoilers, dude. I didn't know that.
Kevin Stadler, I would say maybe a tournament option more so, but Hulk and Thor are going to pick up most of the ownership, I think. Let's talk about the top stacks here. And this is another slate where for the most part, we've talked about some of the ownership, but in terms of the actual top stack probabilities, it's a really flat day. Nobody projected for over a 10% probability to be a top stack. And we talked about Minnesota a little bit, Alex, but the ownership for Minnesota is going to be ungodly onerous. It looks like no matter what site you were playing on today, over a 10% negative leverage score on DraftKings, a 11 or actually almost a 12% negative leverage score on Fanduel. I know you've mentioned for some hot takes about just pulling stacks out of a lineup or out of your overall approach, Alex. Are you willing to just rule Minnesota out based on really, really lofty ownership?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of slates where we find there's a team really mispriced, and you're better off just taking the field than taking the chalk. So I do feel like this might be a quintessential example of that, where the ownership of Minnesota is about twice as high as their probability of being the top scoring stack. And you need the top scoring stack on a 13-game slate most likely. So just playing the odds there, it makes a lot of sense to fade Minnesota, particularly on Fanduel. On DraftKings, I think you could pull off a Minnesota stack because Jorge Polanco and Cruz are very low owned compared to Arias and Donaldson. The reason why is people want to jam in these high-priced pitchers and not sacrifice with their stacks. So it just creates an opportunity where you can make a lot stronger stack than other people have of the best team. And you're pitching, you need to get a little lucky, but there are plenty of cheap pitchers that aren't terrible. So that would be one strategy I'd consider.
I guess one follow-up question for you, Alex. Is there a world, I guess, where, like, let's say Minnesota, like everybody's 3,300 or something. I think maybe that's one way. Like, does that maybe make you think, okay, I can play Minnesota now just because the value's there, in addition to, like, the ownership is lofty, but it sort of makes more sense? Like, I'm just wondering, is there a benchmark for you personally where you would see this and go, or, the ownership's lofty, it clearly looks over-owned, but I'm still willing to go there because of X, Y, or Z reason?
So you just mean Minnesota on FanDuel today, basically?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's a good point.
They're so cheap.
Yeah, I think if I was going to do it, it'd be because like certain bats are low owned and the rest of the stack is high owned. Another guy you could consider is Mitch Garver. Since he's a catcher, he's a little bit more of a hard spot to fill, and he's probably batting low in the order, and he's expensive. So I'm thinking he could be lower owned than the rest of the guys. It's 250 ISO on the year. So on FanDuel as well, like, because you don't need to pick a catcher, I think he'll be lower owned than the rest of the guys. So the main thing I'd avoid is just building a lineup that clicks a little bit too well, because there aren't that many ways to build a lineup that just everything fits perfectly. That generally indicates you're following a very similar construction to everyone else.
Alex, here's a credit to you. Michael Barkley saying that you have the best takes and on the show, and I'm personally shocked that the man who has won millions of dollars playing DFS has the best DFS takes on the DFS show. Just need to throw that out there, because Michael Barkley, the bane of my existence. But apparently he could be nice to you. So that just got to give you the credit there. You've won over the untamable beast.
Thanks, Michael. You're okay in my book.
Corey, me, I'm offended. I'm out of here. That's it.
Yeah, Terry, I think unfortunately you're in the trash bucket with me here.
Shot,
so that's
man.
not, yeah. But no credit for my prescient question driving Alex to make his brilliant takes. But it's not, people don't get it. People don't appreciate the assist, man. Corey Randall asking a question about the Tampa stack. And Terry, this it's a $5 super chat, so we have to jump to Tampa right now. It does seem like they project to be a little bit lower owned. Their potential to be a top stack on DraftKings, and the 5.1 implied run total's a pretty good mark, but it doesn't seem like on this slate, even a slate this big, like they would stand out meaningfully to me. And going against Brad Keller, a guy who's really is one call to fame is that he keeps that ball down, a 25% fly ball rate. I don't know this would be the spot for me, but it's high implied run total, and we got the super chat, Terry. So give me your Tampa Bay thoughts.
Yeah, Keller's really just not a guy that I tend to attack all that much. He suppresses power marks coming back the other way, which in turn suppresses projections overall a little bit in my model. And the Rays are kind of priced up on the FanDuel slate, at least. And it looks like that's true across the board on DK as well. There are a few hitters in here where you could get to some cost savings and, offset it and build whatever you want. But then you're dipping down to the bottom of a somewhat weak bottom line of a lineup. So I don't really love it. There's not a ton of people on it. Everybody in the lineup projected under 10% ownership on FanDuel, barely any ownership on DK. So you're getting different enough with it. But their projection for their probability of being the top stack on both sites was not really dramatically outstripping their public ownership. So I think it just kind of falls into that fine play from that perspective that it's okay. And then when we factor in the idea that Keller's going to keep the ball on the ground, keep the ball on the yard, it's just not a spot for me. I could be wrong. I could definitely see like an Austin Meadows, Brandon Lowy combination, the two lefties in there being a decent spot for a little pop, but it's not likely.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on Tampa Bay to add on top of that?
They're okay. I mean, they got some good power bats, so that always helps in a stack. Well, there are two factors going against Tampa Bay today. They are playing in an indoor park in Tropicana, so that does make the upside a little bit lower because so the conditions are favorable for pitchers. And then the other one is they're the home team. There's just a little bit less variance because you don't get the ninth inning if they're having a day where they're scoring 10 runs. So I think they're fine to throw in some lineups, but they're not a priority for me.
Another team that's going to be a priority for a lot of people out there today, it looks like, will be Cleveland. Another team with a decent implied total, 4.8 runs, but they also project to be incredibly over-owned according to the top stacks tool, 8% higher ownership than their projected chance of being a top stack today. A little bit less egregious on FanDuel, where it's only 3%. But Terry on the spot, again, I think another team that fits some of the criteria that Alex is talking about, just a lot of ownership and the price tags, I guess, more reasonable. So that's the one thing you can say for them. They are going against Tariq Skubal, who has been not the best when not facing Seattle recently, but does have a 5.5 xFIP on the year, high launch angle, high barreled ball rate at 18%. But the ownership, Terry, just so onerous that I think it's tough to get to Cleveland. Do you feel differently? And I guess make it native to FanDuel too, where it's not quite as ownership of an ownership projection.
Yeah, the ownership's a little bit more friendly on FanDuel, although through 2, 3, and 4, you're getting similar to slightly higher ownership. Depends on which guy we're focusing in on specifically, but 2, 3, 4 are pretty highly owned on both sites. They're inexpensive on FanDuel, which I'm surprised is actually not leading to more ownership in this matchup. They lose Franmil Reyes. He's on the DL for 4 to 5 weeks. So it takes one of their better power bats out of this lineup. I do think Eddie Rosario's got a little bit of appeal. Only 5% owned on FanDuel, 2,600, 3,400 on DK, only pulling like 11% ownership. I think maybe I might pull him for a one-off in some spots rather than go to this as a full stack and maybe try and capture the home run upside, because I do think there's good home run upside here overall, and that's one that people aren't really going to go to lefty. So I think that could be a little bit sneaky, and I do get decent marks on them. Overall, though, yeah, probably not a stack I'm going to go to more than the public. I would probably look to undercut this spot just based on the nature of the lineup that they're rolling out there. I mean, Owen Miller, Howard Ramirez, Yu Chang, and Austin Hedges through the bottom of the lineup, not exactly world beaters. Austin Hedges does have some sneaky power. If you're looking for a wildly sneaky, actually, he's 10% on. Forget it. He's not even, he would be if he wasn't getting owned, but he is. So, yeah, sneaky power there, but everybody's going to be on him. So, yeah, Indians aren't really for me.
So tell me, Terry, then, because I'll put you on the spot here. We've talked about a lot of stacks here that would project to be pretty popular on paper, but that also look good on paper, but just going to be really highly owned. So is there a stack that you are finding today, whether it be on FanDuel or DraftKings, that you think is going to be has a high potential here to get going, but not going to be egregiously overowned like Minnesota and Cleveland will be today?
The Oakland Athletics fill that for me. I get very nice projections and very nice power marks for them in their start against Logan Gilbert here. They are the home team, so we do lose that potential that Alex mentioned before, but I think there's enough opportunity. And like Alex said, when we talked about Gilbert, we don't know the length that this kid's going to give us. He's had 2 clunky starts already, gave up 2 home runs in his first start. I think he went 4-1 and then 2 2/3 in another one. So just not a huge sample size for the kid either, but he's a decent strikeout option, but I just don't think he's overly seasoned. I think he's a kid that just needs more time. He barely pitched above high A. He struck out 28.7% of hitters in 9 AA starts in 2019, then didn't pitch, then was brought up to the show after just 1 start at AAA early this season. So I just don't think he's ready. I think he's a decent prospect. Throws 94-mile-an-hour fastball. It's a basic fastball, slider, curveball arsenal, and he really leans on the fastball. 59% usage so far in the majors. So I just think given the upside, given the power and the quality of hitting in this Athletics lineup, they're not getting enough ownership and they're not that expensive. So I really like the A's here.
Alex, do you have any Oakland thoughts, or do you want to offer up another stack that you find to be, we've pointed people, I guess, some of the potential landmines out there, but if you want to talk more about Oakland, or if there's another stack that speaks to your soul more, feel free to bring it to the people now.
Yeah, I like Oakland. Terry summed it up well enough for me. San Francisco, Terry, you mentioned them. I think they're very solid today. Just a team that's a little bit underhyped in general. Buster Posey is having like a ridiculous season so far, where it looked like he was going the way of Joe Mauer, where just no power. But this season, he's gone from having like 100 ISO to 290 so far. So he does seem to have a lot more upside right now. Some other teams that I might consider. I do feel like people are going to gravitate towards the spend up options at pitcher because DeGrom and Scherzer are on the slate. So I'm looking at some expensive stacks that maybe you need to go a little bit more budget on your pitchers, but they have tremendous stuff. So one obvious one is Toronto, where they're very priced up today. They're going against Kluber, who is coming off that no-hitter recently, but I'm not convinced that he's a great pitcher at this point in his career. So, I mean, this is really just betting on the talent of the Blue Jays, whose top 5 all have really good power. And then another option could be Boston, where they have a great park. They're facing Charlie Morton, who's a solid enough pitcher. But if they can get past Morton, I think they could be in a good spot. Just a little bit overpriced today, but it's one of those teams where no one's going to be on them. So if they do have their day, you can ride them to the win, even if your pitching isn't quite as good.
I like the poetry of riding them into the win. That's that's a nice one. We don't normally squeeze those in on the MLB shows, but I'm happy to hear more of those. Terry, any final stacks you want to throw in here? You mentioned Oakland. I feel like we've covered about as many teams as we can, or I guess, do you want to go and segue here to any other teams that you just wouldn't play today? Because I do think we have a few that fit that criteria. Like you do have Colorado having an under 1% chance of being a top stack. I feel like they would be a non-starter. I feel similarly about Milwaukee. I think really the top 5 here, San Diego, Cincinnati, Mets, Milwaukee, Colorado. I wouldn't be opposed to just taking those guys out of the player pool for the most part. I guess you are getting a little positive leverage for Cincinnati and San Diego, but I just don't know that I see the possibility for those guys to have big days. But Terry, do you have any, I guess, that you'd feel similarly about?
I'll answer that the other way around. Out of those teams that you mentioned, Cincinnati's the one I'd be most likely to leave in. Throw them back against the pitcher a little bit. I talked about the offense. I really like that offense, and I get to them quite a bit. I wasn't getting them completely suppressed in my home run model. I wasn't getting them completely suppressed for projection. So I would leave them in. I'm not wild about the Arizona stack from down the bottom of the list there. I totally agree on Colorado and Milwaukee. I don't like to fully forklift teams out of my process entirely, but these are teams that I am not looking to get to by any means, outside of maybe some shares of Cincinnati.
All right. I guess, Tyler, are you ready to do a run through the Hall of Fame? We haven't done it in a while on the show, and I realize that I never do it on the show. So why not? Let's do it. Awesemo Hall of Fame time here. And the way you can find your way to the Awesemo Hall of Fame, besides watching all the shows and contributing, is tweeting at Awesemo HOF, downloading that Awesemo avatar at awesemo.com/avatar. And if you finish in the top 3 of a tournament with 5,000 people or more, you can get yourself a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And here are some of the luminaries that you can see on the screen right now. We got Ronnie Rogley here, which, if that's a real name, it's a fun name. Thanking Awesemo here, a first place win in an NBA Showdown and won. And he didn't chop it either. Kudos to him. Boo Cup saying Team Awesemo here, getting a first place win. It looks like in the bean, actually no, third place finish in the bean ball, and a couple other nice finishes as well for him too. We have the other one, and one S Cohen 21 picking up a first place finish in the and one, chopping it up with 3 people, but definitely could be worse than another Showdown one. We got Brian Waitula got his first win thanks to Awesemo himself. Oh, I'm tagged in this one too. So Brian, I like Brian more than any of these other guys. Oklahoma walk-on. Shout out to him taking down another showdown for himself. And then you also have Gray Kid, 2 Ds here. Is he perhaps an aged Jason Kidd? We may never know. But he's thanking Team Awesemo_com a lot. Not a huge amount, but the bankroll's on the rise because of guys like you. Appreciate the work you put in so average Joes like me can succeed at this. And Alex, I feel like that's a pretty cool one to hear because I know that was sort of one of your goals initially for Awesemo, was sort of to democratize this information for people out there. And apparently really paying off, at least for Gray Kid right now.
Yeah, I mean, congrats to everyone. And that's definitely a main motivation because there's a lot of sharp people playing in these fantasy tournaments that you're competing with. So it's important that if you don't have full time to really dig into the weeds, we can get your back on that.
All right, and let's do the home run picks here to close us out. Obviously, that is an important feature here. The most reliable thing I think we could say on any show is always the home run pick. So, Terry, I know you have your power index model. You are always looking at everything power related. So tell me, who is your home run pick for the day?
Well, since you were on me for being such a chalk donkey with the Anthony Santander pick that did not come through yesterday, I'll go a little bit less on, a little bit off the board from the team I just talked up, and I'll go to Mark Canha leading off for the Oakland A's. Really like the spot for some power there.
Alex, how about you? Who would be your home run pick to close us out?
So I'm going to go with Buster Posey. I mean, his ISO this year of 290 is by far his highest in his career. And sometimes I've found that there are reasons for a unknown increase in power. So I don't know exactly what Posey's been up to because he didn't play last year, but apparently he's got home run power this year, and why not take a chance there?
Giants still got Barry Bonds' phone number.
I'm sure that head is as large as ever, ready to knock some balls out of the park. Maybe he and Buster Posey and Nelson Cruz have all been sharing the same stash to keep them so vibrant at their advanced age. I will go against Tariq Skubal for mine, and I'll go to Jordan Luplow, a launch angle king going against a launch angle sieve in this spot. And I do think even though that Cleveland stack is going to be very overowned in a team, you might be just willing to rule out of the pool because of that. Still some potential here to get power from one or two of these guys. And to me, Luplow will be that dude. Make sure you follow at DigitalB21, follow at Awesemo DFS, follow at Chris Spags, and also follow at Awesemo_com. We have all the content that goes on the channel, funnels through there every day, in addition to some surprise giveaways. Even sometimes we don't have ones to plug on the show. That's what you can find at Awesemo_com. So make sure to go follow that right now. Also hit the like button on the video before you go and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys again soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck.